Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. We are back at it today and we are making some fudgy brownies. I'm thinking I'm going to also incorporate a little bit of Nutella swirl into it just to take it to the next level. But as always, I'm going to wait just a couple minutes to let people join. We're starting a little bit later than usual today, but that is okay. We're taking our time and it's going to be worth it for these brownies. If any of you want to bake along with me at home, you can Google Chill Sweets. This is actually a version of my Biscoff brownie recipe, so we're not going to be making the crust that's in that. However, that is delicious on its own. But today we're just going to be swapping out the Biscoff for some Nutella. Honestly, they're both delicious. I love them equally, but I just want to mix things up a little bit. So Nutella is our mix-in of choice. Also, you guys, the recipe today is using butter. If you have like a dairy intolerance or you have to be dairy-free for whatever reason, allergies or anything, I actually have a dairy-free recipe, dairy-free brownie recipe up on chillsweets.com as well, so you can check that out too. Just be sure to use like dark chocolate so you don't have any milk. I think it's like milk solids, milk bits in your chocolate. So yeah, you guys, I've got some of my stuff out here. I actually don't have everything mise en place today because I figured it'll be more fun to actually like bake the way I really do with you guys. But I have some things set out ahead of time. As always, you want to make sure that you set your ingredients that need to be at room temperature out ahead of time. So I have here my butter. I like to cut it up just into small pieces like this. It helps it come to room temperature so much faster. You can also lay it on a plate if you're really in a rush, but I cut this up about a half hour ago, and then I also popped it in the microwave for like 10 to 15 seconds just to make it a little bit softer, and by the time we incorporate into this recipe, it's going to be perfect. You can also set butter out though like hours ahead of time as long as your kitchen isn't too hot, so you don't have to go that method, but this also just makes it easier to mix in, I find. The other thing that we need to have at room temperature today is our eggs. So I set these out and I actually had them in some warm water. That's a really great trick if you forget to set your eggs out and you want them to come to room temperature quickly. Just pop them in a bowl, generally a bigger bowl than this. Fill it with some hot water, not like boiling water, you're not trying to cook the eggs, but just some warm water for about 5 minutes will bring them right up to room temperature. Now, as I say every time, it's really important that your cold ingredients are brought to room temperature before you incorporate them into, I totally just lost my train of thought, before you incorporate them into your recipe, because it just really affects how things bake, how they rise, the texture. If you have cold ingredients, a lot of times whatever you're baking doesn't rise quite as much, and that is not what we're after most of the time. So letting those ingredients come to room temperatures will make a huge difference in how your baking turns out. So if you're not doing that already, be sure to start now. If you already are, good, great, I'm so happy to hear that. I also always try to make sure things are room temperature too. You seriously can tell the difference like in both like just even looking at it and just the way it tastes. Like it's night and day, it's super important. Let's see, Becca Staples said she's so glad she got to catch this live. I'm so excited you're here. Yeah, anyone who's just tuning in, if you want to say hi, go ahead and leave a comment and maybe share where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear. I'm tuning in today, as always, from Seattle, downtown Seattle. We've been here for about 2 months now. I think I'm pretty much adjusted to my new kitchen. I like having a lot more space than I did in New York, so no complaints on my end. Okay, so without further ado, you guys, let's go ahead and start making these Nutella swirled brownies. So I have here my digital scale, and this is really great for measuring out things like sugar, flour. That way you know you're getting the exact right amount, and you're gonna be good to go. Let's see, Becca said, I love all the tips you give. You definitely make my baking better. I can't believe you just said my name. I'm fangirling. Hello, Becca. You're too sweet, and I appreciate that. I'm just a fellow baker, just like you. So we're gonna go ahead and start making our brownie batter. And when you're making brownies, it's really important that you really whip up, well, in my opinion, it's really important. When I eat a brownie, I want it to have kind of like a crinkly top, you know, like a shiny top that's kind of has some almost like ruffles or ridges. To me, that's like that little layer on the top just truly makes a brownie. And if you want that, you really need to whip up your eggs and your sugar at the first step of making these brownies. It almost makes like a meringue essentially, because you're whipping up, except for it's full eggs, egg and egg white, or egg yolk and egg white. But it still has the same thing where it's incorporating air into it, and then as you bake the brownies, that air is kind of going to rise and create that really fun layer on top. It also is going to look really cool because we're swirling that Nutella in, and it's going to just make these brownies even prettier. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. We're going to add our 2 eggs into our large bowl. And whenever you're cracking an egg on the counter, or whenever you're cracking an egg in general, you want to crack it on your counter as opposed to the edge of the bowl. Sometimes that can cause your eggshells to get into whatever you're making. If you crack it on a flat surface, you just have a much lower chance of having that happen. Ironically, as I said that, a little piece of eggshell just went in my egg. I feel like I had that coming to me. I jinxed myself. But in general, it's just a good rule of thumb. Let's see if this one's a little better. That one is much better. Also, the egg yolk in this one is huge. I'll have to show you that in one sec. I'm just gonna rinse off my hands. Okay. This is just nuts. Look at the difference in that. I don't know, let's see if that maybe is an easier way to see. Just I cannot get you guys to see. It's nuts, just believe me. It's literally like double the size. So next we're gonna add in our brown sugar and our white sugar. And we're adding in 1/2 cup of each. So I have my scale here. Let's see if I can get that there. We're gonna pop this on, and 1/2 cup of sugar is 100 grams. So we're gonna start adding that in. You always wanna make sure you zero out your scale before you start adding in, so it's easy to tell how much you're adding. I always try to take my time with this because you want it to be just right. We're at 95, 98, 100, perfect. And then just as a reminder, you guys, whenever you're storing brown sugar, make sure you really seal it tightly. There's nothing worse than going to get out your brown sugar and having it be hard. There's a bunch of things you can do to prevent your brown sugar from going hard. I think there's like, you can put a piece of bread in it, you can heat it up with like a moist paper towel to kind of like steam it and incorporate some more moisture into it. But at the end of the day, it's just so much easier if you just store it really properly, wrap it up well. You can also put it in a Ziploc bag. All those things make a big difference. I go through mine pretty fast, so I just make sure I wrap it tightly and chip clip it. But always keep that in mind. Okay, so we'll put that away. We've got 100 grams of granulated sugar here. Let's set it back to 0. Here we go. We're at 90, 100, perfect, okay. Set this away, and then now I'm just gonna use a hand mixer. You could also use a stand mixer. So I have the KitchenAid hand mixer. I really love it. I have it in yellow. And I like using it for a lot of different things, but in general, sometimes getting out my stand mixer just feels like kind of a production. It feels like it's more to clean. So I really enjoy using a hand mixer when I'm just doing something small, or especially when I'm filming actually, because it's a lot easier to actually get footage of the batter that you're making when I'm filming overhead. So I really love using a hand mixer, especially for stuff like this. So we're gonna go ahead and mix this together. First on a little bit of a low speed just to get things incorporated. And then we're gonna mix on a higher speed in just a sec. All right, so we want this to become lighter in color. So I'm just gonna keep on mixing. Let's see. Also, you guys, I preheated my oven to 350 degrees, so if you're baking along, be sure to do that as well. I started mine a little bit ahead of time because my oven takes a long time to preheat, so this is your reminder to do that now if you haven't already. We're going to increase the speed now. We're on a medium to medium-high speed, and we're going to mix, let's say, for about a minute. We're going to put up a little bit more. You can see it's literally getting lighter in color already, which is great. And it's also increasing in volume, and that's just because we're whipping a bunch of air into it, so it makes sense, you know? I like to kind of spin my bowl as I go, just because I think I get a little bit bored just sitting here going like this. So this looks so good. And this is also gonna give our brownies a really amazing texture. It makes them like not too dense. Like they'll be fudgy, they'll be chocolatey, but they're not gonna be like heavy. And that's how I like my brownies. Kind of like them as a balance between fudgy and cakey. I don't really want them to be like too fudgy where it's like really dense and almost just tastes like fudge, literally. And I don't like them to be like cake because I eat cake all the time. Let's see, we've got a question from Becca. She said, do you prefer weight measurements over using cups, or does it just depend on what you're making? In general, for dry ingredients, sugar and stuff, I almost always use a scale just because it's like less dishes and easier and more precise. But you'll see in a minute when we add our leavening agents and salt and things like that, I actually usually do use just teaspoons, because when it comes down to like things that are really small measurements, a scale is just like actually harder to be accurate with, because you could be adding 1.5 grams instead of 1, and like my scale doesn't go down to decimals, so I wouldn't know. So when it comes to really small things that are in teaspoons, I actually do like to use just little, I guess, measuring cups or teaspoons. So yeah, I kind of use both. I use a hybrid system, I guess. All right, so we've got our egg whites and our sugar whipped together. So now it is time for us to sift in our dry ingredients. So the recipe actually calls for salted butter. I only have unsalted, so I'm gonna add in a little bit of salt as well today. That's always a great thing. Like some recipes call for salted butter, some call for unsalted butter. With like frosting, I always use unsalted butter because I really want to control the amount of salt that's in there. With something like this where you're adding just like tons of chocolate, I think that if the salt content varies a tiny bit, it's not quite as noticeable. So so this recipe uses salted butter, and just because it's what a lot of people actually end up having at home, because that's what you eat on toast and things. And so if it's the other way around and you only have unsalted butter, you can just add in, I'm going to add in 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You can add in 1/2 teaspoon if you want a little bit more. It really comes down to your personal preference. So we'll get out our salt, we will get out our baking powder, and then we also need our cocoa and our flour. So I'm just using good old-fashioned all-purpose flour. And then I'm trying to decide, I have dark cocoa powder and regular cocoa powder. And I think I'm going to use regular cocoa powder because I kind of want the Nutella to pop, and I'm thinking if I use dark, it will just be really dark in color with the Nutella. So I think I'm going to use regular. So let's grab that out. Along with our actual Nutella. So, believe it or not, this is my first time using Nutella in our new apartment. I don't even know if this container is open. I think it's not. It's pretty exciting. Oh man, there's nothing like a fresh jar of Nutella, you guys. It smells so good. My mouth is like literally watering. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Also, this is your reminder to drink a little extra water today. All right, so we're gonna sift in a 1/2 cup, let's see. Oh, you guys, another thing I didn't mention, I have my whisk out here. And this is the whisk that I use. If you don't have an electric mixer, or say you're staying at like an Airbnb or on vacation and you want brownies and you still want the crinkly top, you can use a hand mixer. You just really gotta whip it. It's kind of an arm workout and it's a little bit tiring, but you can still achieve similar results. So don't feel like you have to use an electric mixer. You totally can use a hand mixer as well. And then the bowl that I'm mixing in is just a Pyrex glass bowl. I use these for a lot of my videos and kind of like demonstrations because it's easy to see kind of what's going on and how things come together. And also they're just like really durable and easy to clean. So I like them for lots of different reasons. And then when I do mise en place for videos, or when I just want things to like come to room temperature, I use little bowls like this. They come in a variety of sizes, and they're really great just to like have everything out and ready when I'm filming, or just to make baking easier. You know, having your ingredients out kind of helps guarantee that you're not going to forget something, and it ensures that things are really going to turn out the way that you want them to. So it is always a good idea. So with that, I'm gonna put my, let's see, I hope this doesn't touch the, no it does. Oh no, okay, we'll hold that up when we do that. Actually, you know what, I think it'll be fine. Set that there. So we're gonna add in, I'm gonna put this on a scale quickly. We're gonna zero it out. Oh no, I already have flour on me too. And then we're gonna add in our dry ingredients. So in my recipes, I always share the cup measure and the grams. So whatever way you like to bake, you'll be good to go, don't worry. Got it covered. So we're gonna add in half a cup of all-purpose flour, which is 65 grams. And the reason why I like to sift, there we go, is just because sometimes cocoa powder, especially like kind of standard like Hershey's, or really any kind of cocoa though, can have like little clumps in it, and it can make it harder to mix and get a smooth batter, and you don't want any of your dry ingredients like in little pockets in your batter. And then also it can make you over mix your batter, because if you're really stirring trying to get those out, you can end up mixing more than you would otherwise, and that can lead to denser brownies. So to avoid that, I really just like to sift. However, if you don't have a sifter, it's okay. And then as we're doing this, we also want to make sure we are scraping the sides of our bowl with rubber spatula like that. And then this is a sifter that I'm using. I like these sifters because they come in 3 different sizes, which is just like fun for filming. And if you want to like dust something with powdered sugar, like the little one is really cute. And the big one is great for things like this or macarons. So next up, we are going to add in, we are going to add in 1/3 of a cup of baking cocoa, 33 grams. Getting there, we're getting there. There we go. Perfect. Oof, I guess this actually goes in a different cabinet. And then I'm also going to add in a little bit of salt, like I mentioned before, because I'm using unsalted butter. Let's see. Dora asked a question. Dora asked, I've been making your cookies, cakes for about 2 years, and I really appreciate that you put weight measurements in your recipes. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Dora. I know. I feel like people really have preferences of how they like to bake. So I always just try to keep that in mind to make a recipe work for everyone, because I think that using a scale is great, and I prefer doing that too, but I know some people also are a lot more comfortable with using measuring cups. But I appreciate that you like that, because it is a lot of extra effort to make sure I have everything right to a T. I've gotten pretty good at mental math though of measurements, and I actually have a fun little spreadsheet that converts weight, volume of ingredients into weight. Okay, so let's add in a little bit of our salt here, and we're also going to add in our baking powder. Adding 1/4 teaspoon. So we're not adding much, and that makes sense because this isn't like a cake. We don't want it to rise a ton. We want it to rise up just a little bit. Uh-oh. Already making a mess, you guys. All right, so we've got 1/4 teaspoon here. You always want to make sure you level it off. I like to just use the cap of my baking powder can. Get that in there. Put these guys away. I'm a huge proponent of kind of cleaning as you go. So I really enjoy putting things away as I go. It just makes life so much easier. So we're just going to go ahead and shake this into our egg mixture. Get this down there. We're going to have probably a little bit of stuff left over at the end. Sometimes there's some small bits of sugar, or there'll be a little bit of cocoa that isn't going through. This actually is getting most of it. I have a little bit of a wet spot on the bottom, so I'm kind of sifting it through the side. My bowl is a little bit small. So we're going to go ahead and pop this into my sink here. And then I'm going to put away my cocoa powder. And actually, I'm going to experiment. I love experimenting when I'm doing lives with recipes I've made before. I'm actually going to melt my butter, because it kind of can affect, melted butter usually makes things puff up a little bit less. So to make these brownies a tiny bit that's my theory, is that I'll make them a tiny bit fudgier from my brownie experience. And I'm making these for my sister and my brother-in-law, and so I think they would like them that way. So I'm going to pop this in the microwave quickly and put this away. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to put this away as we go. Let's see. I really have things stacked up in here. I'm sure there's a easier way I could be doing my cabinets, but that's okay. my butter is taking about 25 seconds to melt. Grab it out now. And first, I'm going to fold my dry ingredients into here, and then I'm going to add in my melted butter and my vanilla. So I'm just scraping around the sides of the bowl here with my rubber spatula. And it's coming together nicely. It smells pretty good. Dora says she loves the new kitchen too. Thank you. I like it a lot as well. Let's see. Becca asked, how long did you sell cakes, desserts before you started doing content and blogging only? I sold cakes for about 2 years, maybe 2.5 or 3. I guess I started in 2014 and I stopped in 2017. So I wasn't doing it a ton in the beginning though. But I guess technically 3 years. And then in 2017, I kind of started doing a lot more, or I started focusing a lot more on content. All right, so we're stirring this. I'm gonna actually add in my melted butter now. You really wanna make sure you get all that goodness in there. Butter adds so much flavor whenever you add it to anything. So you really wanna get all of it, all that goodness in there. Pop this in my sink. We'll stir this together. I suppose I could also use my hand mixer for this, and maybe I will in a sec. But again, anything I can do to avoid over mixing, I always try to do. I think it's coming together. I think I am going to mix it with my hand mixer just a little bit though. I'll have to share how these end up baking up on my stories later. I'll set this to the side for now. We'll give this a quick little mix on just a low speed. We just want to make sure all those dry ingredients are incorporated and we're not seeing streaks of cocoa or flour. Looks so chocolatey, and it really does smell so good, you guys. I know it's like a little bit early for brownies. I guess it depends on where you're tuning in from. On the West Coast, it's a little bit early. It's 10:30. But it's never too early for brownies in my eyes. All right, so our batter looks really silky smooth. I'm gonna pop these into our bowl, apparently. That really shot off there. I'm gonna pop these into the sink just so they don't drip all over my counter. Try to get all that batter off there. You don't want any of that goodness to go to waste. So now it's time. I think I'm also gonna fold in some chocolate because why not, right? Let's see, I wanna make sure, I always like to double check and oh, I knew it, I forgot my vanilla. You always wanna make sure you read through a recipe before you make it. And that's also why it helps to have your ingredients out in front of you, because if you get to the end of your recipe or you're in the process of doing it and you glance over and you see something, you'll be like, oh, I didn't add that, which is exactly what just happened to me. All right. Luckily, it's just the vanilla, which gets added at the end anyway. So we'll give that one quick stir. Then we'll add our chocolate into here. I think I'm gonna add in some dark chocolate chips. I have so much chocolate in my cabinet, so we'll see what bag I end up grabbing first. We're going to use some 60% Ghirardelli bittersweet chocolate chips. These look amazing. Going to add in about half a cup. Probably ended up doing about 2/3 there, but that's one of those things where you don't have to be quite as precise with that. All right. Looks amazing. So we're ready to prep our pan now. And usually in my recipes, I always say to prep the pan at the beginning, but in reality, I end up doing it at this stage. So we're gonna unplug our hand mixer here just to get it out of the way. Wrap that bad boy up for later. Got a little bit of cocoa on. I always try to clean my mixers or my hand mixers after I do stuff like this, because otherwise they get so dirty over time, you know? All right, so we've got that. So now we'll prep our pan. So I'm actually gonna keep my chocolate chips out, because I'll probably add some once they're baked and kind of have them melt into the top. Let's see. Becca agrees that chunky, chewy, I don't know, chunky, chewy brownies are the best. I guess maybe you mean, oh, chocolate chunks are the best. I do agree with that. Okay, so I have here just like a square pan that's made by USA Pan, which is the most generic name ever, but it works really well. I love it. I'm gonna grab a sheet of parchment over here. I'm pretty sure this will work well. So what I'm gonna do, grab out a pair of scissors and just trim the sides a little bit. So we're almost gonna make a sling, and it's just gonna make it really easy to lift them out once the brownies have cooled. This is a tiny bit too thick, so I'm just gonna trim off about a centimeter or two here, and then they'll be ready to go. Let's see, so, oh you guys, these are the chocolate chunks I'm using. They're so good. I love Ghirardelli chocolate, it really is the best. And then this is the baking sheet that I'm using. All right. It's actually still a tiny bit, I think you can just fold it though. It's a little bit thick on one side, but I think that's okay. So we'll go ahead and just squeeze that into there. Like with brownies, they don't usually stick to the pan, especially pans like this. So I am not gonna spray it. And then also, if you did have just like a wider piece of parchment paper and you were folding it and you really wanted it to stay in place, or you didn't want your flaps to fall onto your batter, I actually recommend using metal binder clips like this. I know it sounds weird, but they really are absolutely amazing. They're obviously like metal, so they're heat proof. You just want to make sure once you take your pan out of the oven, you let it cool a little bit, because if you try to touch those, they're obviously going to be pretty toasty, and you do not need to burn your hands. So we are good to go with our pan now. I'm going to spoon our batter into here. It looks so thick and luscious. Let's see if I can show you guys. Looks so good. I'm drooling over here. I don't know if I really want to give these to my sister and her husband. You guys think I should, or I should keep them for myself? It's really a toss-up at this point. I'm really glad I went with regular cocoa. But you know what, dark cocoa would be really good too. Dark chocolate brownies are absolutely delicious. Okay, getting all that good stuff in there. And then I actually usually use the edge of the bowl just to really clean out my spatula and get everything off. Doesn't make the cleanup easier when you're cleaning your bowl, but it's kind of like easier in the moment. So we've got a question, let's see. You should add your slippers to the shop too, Dora says. That's pretty silly. I should. They're like, most things I get are from Amazon, so I really should. Especially the ones I'm wearing today. I'll have to do that next time, because I am literally always wearing slippers. All right, so I'm just gonna smooth my batter out here, getting in kind of an even layer on my pan. And then we're gonna heat up our Nutella, and we're gonna swirl it in on top. This batter's pretty thick, but I think that's a good thing. There's so many good chocolate chippies in here. You really want to get it all the way into those corners, and then kind of just try to smooth it out. It'll obviously kind of like flatten out as you bake it, but never hurts to help it just a little bit, right? All right, so clean up our spatula, throw this in the sink. Wonderful. And then we're gonna heat up our Nutella. So I'm gonna get out a separate little container because I don't wanna put our Nutella in our egg little ramekin. We're gonna get out a little spoon. So this Nutella has been sitting in my cabinet for a couple months. I got it right when I moved here and I haven't used it yet, but so I'm gonna give it a little stir because it's separated just a tiny bit. I want it to just kind of smooth out. Really, so you can do this with pretty much any spread, whether it's cookie butter, like I think Hershey's makes a lot of like fun peanut butter and chocolate spreads. You could also use peanut butter to do this. The options are really limitless, but you do want to make sure that you heat up whatever spread you're going to swirl into your brownies. It makes it so much easier to kind of swirl into there and incorporate as the brownies bake. This is requiring a little bit of extra effort. But it's important that you stir it like that, or else like the oil at the top is going to interact really poorly with the brownies as they bake. So you do want to make sure whatever you're using is properly stirred. So we're going to take about 1/4 cup here, one more spoonful, and we'll try to get off everything out of our spoon. And then I'm gonna pop this in the microwave. I'm gonna try 15 seconds and just see how that affects the texture. And then we will see from there how it goes. So give me 1 sec. And then also everyone's microwave varies in terms of how kind of strong it is. So, and also like depending on the size of your microwave, the age of it, what type of microwave it is, where you live, all those things can kind of influence how long you need to heat things for. So just keep that in mind and take all time measurements for the microwave with a grain of salt. Alright, so this looks a lot more fluid, I think, a lot more fluid than our last one. So you can see it's a lot easier to stir. It's a little bit flowing a little bit more easily. So now we're going to add little dollops of this just on top of our brownie batter. I would say I'm adding about a teaspoon or 2. Probably going to make about 9 dollops. And I kind of like to space them out evenly. Just that way your swirls are really pretty and kind of like uniform but random. Like as random as a perfectly swirled bit of chocolate can be. I might have a little bit extra. That last bit. Perfect. So that looks gorgeous, you guys. I don't know if you guys can see, we've got our nine little droplets, dollops, whatever you want to call them. And I'm going to grab just a small offset spatula here. You could also use a butter knife. Here we go, moment of truth. So I'm just gonna drag first in lines kind of up and down like this. And I'm kind of just trying to hit the dollops as I go. You're also gonna hit the chocolate chips, and especially because I use such large chocolate chips, they're really creating a little bit of a fun texture. And then I'm gonna go sideways up like this. And if you kind of space it out, I would say like maybe an inch apart, the lines as you're swirling. You should get a pretty beautiful look. We've got a pretty thick bit here. I think that's pretty beautiful, right? I think that's stunning. Let's hope it bakes up that pretty too. All right, so we're gonna pop these into the oven now. As I'm doing that, you guys, if you have any questions about brownies or baking in general, feel free to ask them. Or if you have any ideas of what you want to see me make next in my next live next week, let me know in the comments. I will be right back as we pop these into the oven. Also, these are my favorite oven mitts. I swear by them. I love them. And then this is my countertop oven, so I'm not using that to bake this today. Maybe I should have, but I'm planning to use my regular oven. But I use that for all of my time lapses, and so whenever you see anything fun online that I record, it's made in that oven. I always get a lot of questions about that, so I'm always sure to include it in these. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop these in the oven. Give me 1 sec. Actually, yeah. And then I always like to set a timer on my phone. So I'm gonna get out my phone, set this for about 21 minutes, and then we'll check on them. So bake time really can vary based on your oven, but I think I like to say the range is generally 21 to 24 minutes. In my old oven, it used to be 22 minutes was my sweet spot, so I'll check these and then might let them bake for 1 minute longer, but my old oven kind of baked a little bit hot just because it was a gas oven. So I might need to adjust that. We'll just kind of have to see how they look when I check on them. Let's see, Jonathan is tuning in from Texas. Hello, Jonathan. It's great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. We made some really delicious kind of like Nutella fudgy brownies today, which are really good. Also, you guys, if you ever want to like double the recipe, a lot of my things are kind of smaller batch because a lot of times I'm just baking for like me and my family, and I mean, it's just me and my husband and then like my nuclear family, which is not huge. So if you ever want to like increase your recipe or bring it to a party, or if you're having a big get together, you can always double the recipe and bake it in a 9 by 13 pan. The bake time is a little bit longer. You probably want to bake them for 25 to 30 minutes. but that is always an option, and I share a lot of things like that in my blog posts with my recipes, so if you're ever curious, I usually do have like a double option in case you want to increase either like the size of your cake layers or decrease the size of your cake layers or what have you. So always keep that in mind. Put our Nutella back away. It's like I'm already drooling thinking about those brownies in the oven. Let's see. Mom Jeans said, please make an owl cake for your next annual cake series. I should. I'm planning, as of now, these are very random, but I have a crocodile cake in the works. I have a spider cake in the works. And I actually have a goat cake, which I think is going to be pretty silly but pretty fun. But I can definitely try to work an owl into that. I think that would be really cute. And kind of like fall kind of goes together with that, so it's a good time of year for that. Let's see, Jerlene said, hello, I made your small batch chocolate chip muffins last weekend. They were so good. Question for you, what should I do if I want to stuff the muffins with cream cheese or fruit jams? Great question. What I would do is I would probably fill the muffin tins like 2/3 of the way with your batter, or however high, 2/3 of what the recipe calls for. Add in a spoonful of jam and then top with the remaining batter. In terms of cream cheese, you can do the same thing, but I would recommend like whipping it up before you add it into your muffins, just like with a hand mixer, just to incorporate a little bit of air to make it a little bit fluffier, because I kind of like it to almost be a little bit more cheesecakey. And sometimes I incorporate sugar. So like I made pumpkin cheesecake cookies last week, and I had a cheesecake filling, which really just means like sugar and vanilla and cream cheese. But whipping it up, I feel like makes the texture just so delicious. So I would recommend doing that. I think that would be delicious though. You should definitely do that. Let's see, Jonathan from Texas said, what are you most excited to bake for fall? Pumpkins, apples, or something else? I think in general, I love pumpkin. I think that just the moisture that it brings to recipes, and it's not really just pumpkin, but like all the spices you add in with pumpkin spice basically, of like cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger and allspice and all those delicious things. So I really love anything with pumpkin in it. I think it's just like so delicious and I love eating it. But I made a really fun caramel apple cake recently, which I'll be sharing either this week or next week sometime soon. But it's really good, so I mean that's pretty fun too. And I'm actually thinking about making caramel apple cinnamon rolls, I think later today or tomorrow, depending on how the day goes. So I guess I'm equal parts pumpkin and apples, but really just like warm spices make everything delicious. I haven't really made that much like Halloween decorated things yet. I've been mostly focusing just on recipes and things like that, so hopefully I'll start to do some more of that soon. But I think my animal cakes, like the spider cake, will kind of be like a combination of like Halloween spook and fun, and I guess it'll just be like chocolate flavored. I'm going to use black cocoa, so it won't really be like actually fall flavors, but that's okay. It'd be weird if you like cut into a spider cake and the inside is like apple pie. Maybe not though, maybe that's fitting, who knows. I wonder what, hope all of you guys are excited for fall baking too. Are you guys more excited for like pumpkins or apples? I think it's really a toss up for me, but I have lots of fun fall baking ahead of me. I also think like, I guess we're kind of getting into winter baking with this, but like sweet potatoes are fun to bake with too, and like toasted marshmallows and all of that jazz. Also like walnuts or pecans, and even pies. Like I don't make pie that often, but I really should do that more. But there's just so many good things about the fall and winter, and as I'm saying that, like the sunlight is streaming in through my apartment windows. It's been pretty warm here in Seattle. It hasn't really been super chilly out, but in the mornings and night it's getting like a little bit more crisp. You can like feel it in the air. So I think fall is coming. I don't know. I kind of want it to, I kind of don't. I kind of like enjoying summer weather and prepping for fall and being able to fall bake, but still having like the sunshine. I've never spent a winter here in Seattle, so I'm a little bit nervous for the rain and everything. But I think it'll be okay. Let's see how far along our brownies are. How fun would it be if we could stay on until we pull them out of the oven? I think that'd be pretty great. Maybe I will clean up a little bit. I've got a lot of cocoa on this counter. Also, you guys, I got these flowers from Pike Place Market yesterday, and they're like the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I actually made some really fun sunflower cupcakes yesterday because I was like so inspired by how pretty they were. But I am just in love with them. They're also so reasonably priced. That bouquet was $10. Like in New York, $10 like wouldn't even get me a tiny little terrible bouquet of like flowers that looked nothing like that. But then again, like all things are more expensive in New York, so I guess I shouldn't complain. But I really just love how stunning they are. I feel like I could stare at them all day. And the colors are just so vibrant. People are like, why don't you use that as inspo and like make a flower cake out of frosting? But I don't think there's anything I could do that would ever like be even close to how beautiful these flowers are. Maybe I could like make something inspired by the color palette, but like I could never make my frosting. Some people are really amazing at piping flowers. I think her name's like Leslie Vigil, but she is a cake maker in California, and she does online classes actually, but she is like the most incredible flower piping. Like she's so good. And also Eat Cake Be Merry is another account that does a lot of buttercream florals. She's also amazing. They're both just like incredible. If I had their skill sets, maybe I would try to make a cake inspired by these, but not today, or not yet at this point in my life. I'm gonna take a peek at the brownies and just see what they are looking like. Also just gonna get these cleaned up a little bit. Let's see. I'm gonna pop this in our sink as well. Oof. Yeah, my back has been a little bit tight lately. I actually have a really fun kind of like squishy mat that I stand on here when I'm baking, and I also have slippers on, which kind of helps me be on my feet all day, but that's clearly like not cutting it fully today. But that's okay. I'm gonna check on the brownies quickly. Let's see. I have touch settings on my oven, and so sometimes when I'm going to like move my hand, I'll accidentally touch it and like change the temperature or turn off the oven. So I just did that on accident, but I fixed it, don't worry. We're good. Brownies are gonna be great. But the Nutella is actually like dissolved into the batter, which is pretty fun. And I think these are gonna be so good. I'm obviously gonna have to like taste test one before I send them to my sister and my brother-in-law, because they look mighty fine. Let's see, I was gonna also show you guys, I am gonna store them in an airtight container. Which I like to use these ones. This might be a little bit big because the brownies aren't like that huge, but I really like ones like this. They have like a little rubber seal on the inside. But honestly, I don't think this is gonna be very many brownies, so I might use something smaller. Let's see. Oof. That's actually kind of big too. I might use this one. I think this one would actually be perfect. And it's glass, so I just feel like whenever something's glass, you just like know it's gonna be good. It's gonna keep everything fresh. I have a lot of Tupperware. It's always like floating around in the world because I'm constantly giving away baked goods. But it usually makes its way back to me, so it's okay. I'm gonna put this away quickly. Excellent. We are crushing it this morning. It's only Wednesday, you guys. I've already got brownies on the way. I was trying to think of like other flavors of brownies I can make just for fun. I really want to make raspberry brownies, and I like can't quite tell you why, but for some reason that's like so stuck in my head. I think I could do like a raspberry swirl and then incorporate some like fresh raspberries in there, and I just think it would be like so delicious. I think it's because I really love, there's a raspberry chocolate cake that I grew up eating, and I think it's kind of like that in the back of my mind. I just think it would be like so good. And I've made a lot of raspberry chocolate cakes too, which are equally delicious. So there's that. I also was thinking about doing like, I don't know, I've done like kitchen sink brownies before where you kind of do like salty and sweet, and you have like pretzels and potato chips and M&Ms and everything like that. But I also haven't done like even like peanut butter brownies, so like something like that could be fun too. I don't know, the options are like literally limitless. But if you guys have any ideas of flavors of brownies you think I should make, I would love to hear. I could also do like a s'mores brownie, that would be pretty cute and fun. I always try to think like, what's gonna be delicious and what do I wanna eat, but also what's gonna look really pretty for social media and my blog and for photos and video, because you want something to, I always hope that things will like look as good as they taste. It's like a two-pronged thing. Obviously taste is the most important thing, hands down, but in terms of what I do, just because I'm always sharing, you want to kind of entice people, and people eat with their eyes first, so I want it to look pretty too. Yeah, I don't know. I've done Biscoff, I've done kitchen sink, I've done dairy-free, I've now done Nutella. I also could do like PB&J, but that might be like too many flavors, kind of like going on in a brownie. I feel like that'd be better with like a blondie probably. And then with blondies, I always feel like they're kind of just like cookie bars. It's like a fine line of the difference, but that's okay. I'm gonna have to keep thinking about this and figure it out. I love how there are these little flowers that like have the height. Like the florists that make the arrangements at Pike Place are just do such a cute job. Alright, so I'm gonna set these back on my counter. I'm gonna show you them one more time just because I think the world needs to see how beautiful they are. They're seriously so pretty. Dahlias are one of my favorite flowers. So pretty. I'm starting to smell the brownies and they smell so good. I think I'm not gonna put chocolate chips on top because I think with the swirl there's already gonna be enough going on and like enough chocolate. So put those away. And then we should actually talk quickly about how to cut a brownie. And I know that sounds silly because it doesn't seem like it's that complicated, but it's really important that you let your brownies cool fully to room temperature. And then I actually like to pop them into the fridge and let them get kind of chilled, and then use a nice sharp knife to cut through. And that's what's gonna give you really clean slices, especially if your brownies are a little bit fudgier or if they have a swirl like mine. The Nutella is gonna make it pretty challenging to cut, not in a bad way, in a good way, but it's just gonna make it kind of messy. So having our brownies fully cooled and actually chilled is gonna give us our best chance at getting a really nice clean slice. So I definitely recommend doing that. It also helps if your brownies are chilled to use a sharp knife and actually dip it in hot water. I have like a tall kind of coffee thermos I'll stick mine in, where you can run under hot water, dry it off, and then kind of do that between each cut. And cleaning off your knife after each cut is also going to give you a nice clean slice. You know, you didn't bake brownies from scratch just to have them be like a crumbly little terrible squares that are falling apart. You want them to like look pretty, at least I do. So that's kind of like my approach strategy. So I will probably let them cool on a wire rack when I get them out of the oven, so I'll get that out now. And then it's nice because it's a small pan, so it should cool pretty fast. And I think the pan's made out of aluminum, which is great because it heats up really fast, it bakes evenly, and then it also cools down quickly. So that should help our brownies kind of cool for us. We're not in a rush, but wouldn't mind taking a bite sooner rather than later. So hopefully we'll be able to cut into those soon. I'm gonna take one more peek at them just because I want to see how they're doing. One sec. They really do just like look so beautiful, you guys. I'm salivating. I need a big cup of milk with them. I'm the type of person where if I have like a big piece of chocolate cake or a fudgy brownie or anything chocolatey, I really love to have like a cold glass of milk. Just like tastes so good. Makes it taste like even better. I definitely grew up like dunking Oreos into my milk when I was little. As soon as these brownies are in the oven, I'm gonna go get a coffee because I actually haven't had any caffeine today. And I feel like I could use some. I feel like I'm dragging a little bit. I feel a little bit tired. I wonder how much time is left on these brownies. We've got 5 minutes. I wish they were ready now. The other thing too, you guys, when I was talking about fudgy versus cakey brownies, if you want a fudgier brownie, there's a couple of things you can do. So you can either like use melted butter the way I did. You can also use oil instead of butter, and with that you lose a little bit of the flavor that butter gives baked goods, but it gives it a really like moist, fudgy texture. So that's an option. And the other thing that comes into play is how long you bake your brownies for. Obviously, if you underbake them a little bit, they're going to be a little bit chewier, a little bit like fudgier. You bake them longer, they're going to be not like drier, but they're going to be less fudgy and a little bit cakier. So with that in mind, when you are trying to like look at that time interval of how long you want to bake your brownies for, if you're a real fan of like a really dense fudgy brownie, like maybe you take them out of the oven a minute or two early, you know, and you'll kind of like learn that the more that you bake brownies, if you haven't already made a million batches, you kind of figure out exactly how you like them. And I feel like people a lot of times think like underbaking is such a terrible word, or means like you did something wrong. And if you're making like cake layers and they sink in the center and they're like literally like not cooked, that is not good. That's not what we're after. But if you like something like really moist, and you want to take it out a tiny bit early, like that's fine, as long as it's cooked through, you know, take it out. And actually a lot of times I think people end up over baking things because they err on the side of that as opposed to under baking. But sometimes that can make things like drier or less moist. So you really just gotta learn your oven and kind of figure out your own preferences. I always like my cake layers like out of the oven just the second that they're done cooking through the center. And I almost like think it's like slightly underbaked, but I think it's like so much better. And my husband actually likes them to be baked a couple minutes longer. So it's interesting that we have different preferences, but I think a lot of people do. So half of the battle is just kind of figuring out exactly how you like things, and then the more you make it, kind of like mastering your craft and exactly knowing your oven and how long you want to bake things for. That's been like one of the most interesting things in my baking journey, but I almost always try to like get things out of the oven the second that they are done, because I think they taste best that way. I think most people would agree with me. I think most people would not agree with my husband, but what do I know, right? Got a little bit of cocoa on my hand. Oh man, you guys, 3 minutes left. And then you're gonna get to see the beautiful swirls. I do think raspberry jam would be pretty, but I also think it might kind of like dissolve. You're gonna see, I think the brownies kind of like have baked up around the swirl. And I think if it was like a jam, it would really like engulf it. And also like, I don't think the color would really show because of chocolate. Even if I use regular cocoa and not dark cocoa. I guess I could do like strawberry too, but for some reason I think raspberries and chocolate go better together than strawberries. Another thing that's interesting actually, I made an orange chocolate cake last year that was inspired by those like orange chocolates that you get that you can like crack and break open and have little sections. I like love those. I think they're English, but they always come kind of like around the holidays. So I made a orange chocolate cake, and it was so good. But orange brownies would be really good too. I know it sounds weird, but it's really good. I promise. Let's see, Jerlene asked, have you made a brookie before? I have made I made a brownie with cookie dough before, but it wasn't quite like a baked brookie like usual. I made it actually out of my friend Kristen, who owns Dough NYC in New York. She came out with a cookbook, and I made her brookies. It's like a brownie base, and then it has edible cookie dough layer, and then it has like a fudge, like chocolate glaze on top. It's really good. But I guess it wasn't technically like baked cookies, so technically no, I could try that. I could. Whenever I think of that, I always think of like taking it the step further and making like the really indulgent brownies where it's like brownie, Oreo, cookie dough, chocolate chips. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but like the cross section is crazy, and they're also like pretty tall. But that would be pretty fun too. I'm really trying to think of anything else that goes with chocolate that I can think of. All I can really come to are like fruit options. I think that's just because it's like still summer, and that's kind of what's on my mind. Speaking of underbaking things, we have 50 seconds left. I'm gonna check on the brownies. I'm gonna actually open the door this time, just glance. I think they definitely need at least 1 more minute, and the swirl might actually make them bake a tiny bit longer. Maybe like by a minute, but we'll give them the next 30 seconds and we'll see. Another thing too, you guys, I didn't mention, but if you are gluten-free, you can use most measure for measure gluten-free flour blends. Like I use one made by King Arthur. You can swap out cup for cup, or in this case, a half a cup for a half a cup, and they turn out pretty well. But whenever you do that, let's give this 1 more minute. Whenever you do that, you want to make sure that you let your batter sit for a little bit before you bake it. Just the gluten-free flour needs a little bit more time to like absorb moisture in the batter so that you don't get like a gritty texture. And then it also helps if you actually like over stir your batter. So despite everything you hear about all-purpose flour, gluten-free flour doesn't have any gluten. Like, so that's like what you're afraid of when you're over mixing. You're going to strengthen those gluten strands, which is going to lead to a dense baked good. With gluten-free flour, there is like no gluten, so you don't have to worry about those strands forming, and you actually want to overmix because a lot of the flours that they use are finer, and it helps give your baked good better structure if you mix it extra when you're using gluten-free flour. So just two things to keep in mind: overmix your batter and let it sit for like 20 or 30 minutes if you have the time. When you're making gluten-free baked goods, it really makes such a difference in how they turn out. It's just like a really good idea whenever you're doing that. So for most of my recipes, that's our timer. For most of our recipes, you can do that swap. It works pretty well. So if you're gluten-free, if you're not, you can always try that out. All right, we're gonna get these out of the oven. These look so good. Let's see. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me try to. So beautiful. So good. I got a bunch of Nutella on my gloves somehow. All right, so those look incredible. I'm gonna let them cool a little bit to room temperatures because I don't want them to like sink completely into themselves. Sometimes if you go like from here to the fridge or the freezer, number one, like the pan's really hot, it's not great for like your shelves, and then number two, it can cause like kind of it to cave in, just like the drastic temperature change. I actually do that with my cake layers sometimes, but it's like almost like a pound cake recipe, so it's really sturdy, and it just never like collapses or sinks as it cools. But these are a little bit different, so I'm gonna let them cool to room temperature and then I'll cut them. They really look so pretty. I actually think like the Nutella is like the same color as the brownies, so in hindsight I like should have used the dark cocoa powder, but you know, it's okay. They've definitely got that crinkly top though, and I think they're gonna be so good. Yum. I haven't had brownies actually in a long time. I haven't made brownies in a long time. Couldn't tell you the last time I made brownies. I feel like it was like 2020 when I made brownies last. I'm making a lot of like cakes and muffins and I made so many macarons in the last year. So now I'm gonna have to figure out what I should make next week for my live. And honestly, what I did today was I knew I was gonna be baking something, and I knew I was going over to my sister's later. She just had a baby, and I've been keeping them supplied with lots of treats, just because they're so busy and their schedule's pretty crazy right now. And I asked her what she wanted, and she was like, "We'd love brownies," and so here we are. And I know that they also love Nutella, so I think they'll really like these. But next week I might have to ask her what she wants, or maybe I'll try to see if there's like a recipe I want to play around with. I actually was thinking I made these red velvet cream cheese or cheesecake muffins a few weeks back, and they're so good. Maybe I'll make those because they're pretty fun, and it'd be fun to kind of show you the swirl, and they're really delicious. So I wouldn't mind having someone hand just eat. So maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll make those muffins next. I think that would be pretty fun. We'll see. I reserve the right to change my mind, but as of now, I think that's probably my game plan. Anyways, you guys, I will be sure to also show these once I cut them on Instagram. So if you, hopefully on here, you're already following me. If you're watching, I think the follow button is like floating somewhere in here. And if you don't already follow me on Instagram, my handle is ChillSweets, just like on here, and you can definitely check them out there as well. I'm also actually on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, so you can really find me anywhere. If you like search ChillSweets, pretty much all of those things should pop up. And you also can find all of my recipes on chillsweets.com. So whenever I share something, I always get messages of people like, "Recipe, are you gonna share the recipe?" And I'm always like, yes, I always share the recipe. It's just that sometimes it takes me a little bit of time from when I'm testing something out and then finally filming it. It takes me time to edit it and get it scheduled into like the content calendar to share. But in general, I think pretty much everything that I share on social media or on here, the recipe is up for The recipe for it is up on my blog, so you can always find that on shellsweets.com. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this. I will be going live next Wednesday as always at 10 a.m. PST. And I guess muffins will be more fitting since it's the morning. And I think you guys like the chocolate chip muffin, so we'll see. But I think that'll be fun. So be sure to tune in next week, and if you're following me, you should get a notification when I go live. It should be a lot of fun. So until then, you guys, I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of the day. Bye, you guys.